should be your last question. You're smart. You are one of the class favorites. Yeah,
You know,
because you have a good voice. Yeah.
I have to tell you,
What
you
one
know,
thing?
like I have a complex, inferiority complex of commenting on gender. But I think that every woman knows when she's sending signals and she's not sending signals. I mean, that can be some idiots
So
who
say it.
misinterpret it.
Say it. I have one comment for you though. Oh. I have one comment, which is when you speak up. Why are you shy? Like when you speak
Am
up.
I shy?
It's not shy. It's shy.
Maybe that's cultural thing.
It's not shy. It's not shy. But you come across very courteous. You go hello. So it comes across about confident. I know you're confident. I know you're not shy. But you kind of know that versus right. So next time, just try it when you speak. Just keep the same. Keep level. Because you start like this,
Hello.
and you're not. I know you're not. I know this is pretty. You're not embarrassed. You're not shy. You're not confident. But from a Western culture, I don't know how it's different. Maybe you're not taught to speak level. But it just comes across like.
Yes,
Because you
it
also
should
look
be
down
done.
when you speak sometimes.
So there was a large group of 140.
So I should stop
Second
making you
group
a
of
politician.
150.
You should, of
Yeah,
course.
They're all making their way out. They're kind of curious.
Dana, did you get that? Thank you.
Okay.
That's very.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. And I'll pelt my head behind L130 to see what they're doing. I think that's it.
Which one? Can I hear your daughter?
Do we have got like guys milling around? I think we're fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should talk to her more.
We don't
I
have
think
Jerry,
Allie
so.
and Mariam I'll find another seat. Someone took my seat up there. I shouldn't have left it. It was my fault, I think. No. Is that one pink? It's right in the middle. Oh, I don't want to. Yeah. These are all pink. See if I can. Hey, Jen, how are you?
How's your cipher going?
Such a crazy busy day. Do you hear my? Are you staying?
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. My name is Palwasha Kakar, and I work at the U.S. Institute of Peace on Religion and Inclusive Societies. I work on engaging with the religious sector, making sure that women, youth, and all kinds of minorities, ethnic and religious, are included in peace processes. But why do I do what I do? This actually started when I was a very young girl. I am an Afghan and an American. My mother hails from Iowa, and my father hails from northern Afghanistan, from a province called Faryab. And I was born in Seattle. But in 1989, when the Soviets were pulling out of Afghanistan, my family decided to move back. And we only got as far as Peshawar, Pakistan, because of all of the internal conflict that was happening there. And it was there that I met my extended family. I met my cousins, my uncles, and my aunts. And I quickly realized that I was the only girl cousin going to school. And I wanted to do something about that. And so, within that context, I tried to engage with my uncles and my aunts and my cousins. And engaging with them on the social benefits, the economic benefits of educating girls and women, none of that really worked. It wasn't until I started talking about the religious obligation to educate girls that it really made a difference, and that we were able to really get somewhere in the conversation. And with the help of my parents, we were actually able to convince my uncles and aunts that they should do something and allow their daughters to go to school. And I'm happy to say that now I have cousins who are doctors and teachers and have gone to school, and it's now a tradition in my family. So after that experience, living in Pakistan, I came to the US for my higher education. And during 9/11, I heard all of the rhetoric about how we have to save the Afghan women. And I quickly thought, well, how are we going to do this without credible local frameworks? So I wanted to go to Afghanistan and work in this field. And after I finished my higher education in 2004, I went there. And I was very lucky to actually be able to go to villages and sit with women and talk to them. And I was doing research on development and development councils and how women were participating at this local level in development councils. And it was there that I realized that women were going far beyond development. They were incredible at mediating conflict. They created this safe space for women to come together and express their problems and talk about their issues. And these women were then going into the families and mediating conflicts in the families, mediating conflicts between families, mediating conflicts on land rights, and even going so far to mediate conflicts between different villages over resources, land and water resources. These women were incredible leaders in their communities. They were elected, so they had that representation, that support of the community. But these women were also there because they had this moral authority. They were considered religious women. So there they were mediating all kinds of conflicts. More recently, I heard stories of how these women were actually going and mediating conflicts with armed insurgent groups. We're going into areas where there was wars and fighting and crossing borders to mediate the release of hostages, to mediate land issues, land conflicts. And as I was hearing these stories and sharing it with my friends around the world, I started realizing that this was not just happening in Afghanistan. This was happening all around the world. Women were doing incredible work at mediating conflicts at the local level. So I came to the belief that their inclusion in peace building is our hope for a more secure future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Hi, I'm Maggie Williams, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. This is the first forum in 2017, so we are so grateful that this is how we are opening our doors. I'm Maggie Williams. I'm the director of the Institute of Politics here at Harvard. And tonight we continue a series of forums that focus on the inclusive security of women and girls that live in volatile parts of the world, often risking their lives to bring security and peace to their communities. We are joined tonight by 5 amazing women whose stories should be heard by all, known by all, and who will in turn inspire all of you. Ambassador Swanee Hunt will lead our discussion. She is the Eleanor Roosevelt Lecturer in Public Policy here at the Harvard Kennedy School and an international public policy leader with long experience working with women in war zones, helping them engage in processes of peace and reclaiming their countries and their lives. From 1993 to 1997, Swanee served as a U.S. ambassador to Austria, where she worked to help stabilize neighboring Balkan states and bring women into peace efforts there. In 1997, she launched Vital Voices, Women in Democracy, an international conference that became a State Department program and remains a thriving NGO today. I commend you all to her memoir entitled Half-Life of a Zealot. Swanee and I go back a long time. Over the years, I have been privileged to have her friendship and her encouragement. But when I think about Swanee, only one word comes to mind: fortitude. She has been fighting for women and girls every day for decades. She never gives up. She never slows down. She has boundless energy. I do not know where she gets it, but she is a visionary genius. I'm honored to present to you tonight my friend, Ambassador Swanee Hunt.
Can we get the hug?
Yes.
It's kind of a women's thing, you know, to hug like that. Okay. You know, Maggie, one of the reasons I'm so glad to be back here is we started coming here in '99. We had the first meeting here on exactly this subject, and Dean Nye and Senator Kennedy, they were the ones who actually launched it. Hillary Clinton did the same thing as First Lady in the White House. And so we have our roots here. We had brought 100 women from 10 conflict areas, and then 100 policymakers flew up on their own nickel to meet with these 100 women. And there were all kinds of researchers and then students, et cetera, et cetera. It was a spectacular beginning. I remember Derek Bach, who was president of Harvard, said, "Why don't you just choose 3 conflicts?" And I said, because then people are going to say, "Oh, yeah, I've heard about those women in Kenya. Aren't they amazing?" As if they're the only ones, you know, in Africa. Or they'll say, "Oh, yeah, those women in Colombia, they're spectacular. You know, they're kind of like the Kenyans." And it'll become so isolated rather than an understanding that across the world, women, people may think of them as victims, but hey, you know, women who survive what they survive, I wouldn't call them victims. The other piece of it, though, is that women are in leadership, and they are really carrying the torch for stopping war. And so people like to think of women and war in terms of the hardships that they go through. And that's a good thing to think about because we need to address those hardships. But there is this whole other side of what we call inclusive security, which is to say, if in fact you include women around the table, you're much more likely to get a sustainable peace. And by the way, we finally have enough numbers to show that in terms of the quantitative studies. This is a whole different security paradigm.
You know, it's been very much a bombs and bullets idea in terms of how you deal with war. And in fact, the whole idea of soft power, which is this other way of using persuasion, using diplomacy, using examples, et cetera, that was born here. That was born here. Joseph Nye, he's the person who wrote the book. And he has talked to me over and over about how women's leadership in these situations is an example of what he meant when he talked about soft power. And it's an idea that's really caught on. It's not enough. There aren't enough policymakers who understand it, but there are a lot. In fact, there's 63 countries that now have national strategies about how to advance women, particularly in stopping war. And as we said in the topic for this evening, to stop a war and thwart the next. There is a lot of experience now from which we can pull. The way we generally think of stopping a war is you get the warlords around the table, and you get someone who is a UN mediator or negotiator. And all the warlords take their guns and they put them under the table. And then they say, okay, I agree. I'll take the timber and you can have the oil. You know, and okay, you can have the diamonds. You want the rubber? Okay. And now that's the peace agreement. Well, obviously, these people, and they are guys, these guys, they know nothing about advancing peace. So we have a ridiculous construct here. So here's the idea. You bring more tables to the table. More chairs to the table. It's not that those guys can't be there. They need to be there. But you bring more chairs around the table, and the people you bring are the people who are the most highly invested, who are the most experienced, the most adept, and that is the people who've been excluded. The largest group of those is 51% of the population, which is the women. So even though the word we use here is inclusive security, and we talk about the women, think of it more broadly. In fact, the research says that if you have women around the table, they will make a point of having other groups included. So think of it much more broadly than that. Okay, before I go further, I want to honor 9 women who've come together for a multi-day meeting. It should have been 10 women. Naila Ayesh from Gaza was unable to get her visa in time. As you know, that is a common occurrence for Palestinians who are trying to get to the US. And no comment besides that. So in addition to the 4 women that I'm going to introduce in a minute, let me ask the women leaders who are here from Iraq, Liberia, Philippines, and Sri Lanka, if you will stand, please, and Afghanistan, Palwasha, again. And then let me introduce here Mariam Jalabi, who is founding member of the Syrian Nonviolence Movement and director of the Syrian National Coalition's Representative Office to the UN. She is a powerful, powerful voice for women's inclusion in the Geneva peace talks. I have been with you many times, Mariam. I leave inspired. When you ask Maggie where I get my energy, it's being with people like you, Mariam. Sure, it's from the heart. Alice and Nderitu, how many countries have we worked in? Quite a few. Yeah, too many. Is that senior mediator at the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, currently working to broker peace in Nigeria and also in South Sudan. No easy task, right? South Sudan is now being written about with enormous concern as the next Rwanda, staring a genocide right now in the face. And Nigeria, it's so complex, and I know that you've been working in a negotiation with 56 different tribes or ethnic groups, and I hope that you'll speak to us about that. I should warn you, tell you that Alice Nderitu is one of the most fun storytellers that I've ever known. So be fun and tell stories, okay? Please. Now, this is a person next to her whom I adore. We're like sisters. Israela Iran, retired brigadier general in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. She's the first woman to command an all-male officer training course in the Israeli Air Force and to serve as the IDF's deputy spokesperson. As I said, she used to be a general, but now she describes herself very much as a peace activist. And you were very disappointed, I know, that Naila wasn't here sitting next to you. It's the first thing you said when you came. Where is Naila? Rosa Emilia, wow, you've really been in the crucible, right? Co-founder of the Colombian National Women's Network and director of the Corporation for Research and Social and Economic Action. You recently, of course you know this already, Rosa Emilia recently advised female members of the Colombian government's peace negotiations team. It sounds so dry when I read it, but you are anything but dry. And Palwasha, thank you for your opening words. Palwasha is the Senior Program Officer for Religion and Inclusive Societies at the USIP, which stands for the United States Institute of Peace. It's congressionally funded from both sides of the aisle. Formerly, she was the Director for Women's Empowerment and Development at the Asia Foundation, and she was the head of the UNDP, that's the UN Development Program, Afghanistan Gender Mainstreaming and Civil Society Unit. And you know, if I had all of that behind my name, I wouldn't have introduced myself with it either, Palwasha. I mean, you know, I must say, these women are so alive. They are such spectacular friends to each other, friends to me, but much more, friends to your countries and friends to the world. And my job, as I see it, is really to get out of their way this evening. This is not a panel. This is a conversation. And so I'm just going to put out a question, which is, when you think about your country, when you think about the conflict, you think about the role of women, you know, you are the women, right? You are not only the expert about what women are doing, you are the women yourselves. So bring us into your world, however you want to do that. Whether it's the political, whether it's talking specifically about what women are doing in your space, or however you want to do it. Open invitation.
You know, thank you for this opportunity. If I may go first. I come from Kenya, and it's been a privilege to sit with these ladies again. This is not the first time we've sat with these ladies and talk about the important work that we do, and work that is so non-quantifiable, like, for example, what we are discussing today, preventing conflict, ending wars. Because how do you quantify what you prevented, what is invisible? How do you say that this could have happened and it didn't happen? And then we then sit back and are happy that we were able to prevent a conflict, but it can't make headline news. It's not something you'll be discussing here in Harvard, but it's something that we'll be discussing amongst ourselves and patting ourselves on the back for something that we did. It's almost like a hippopotamus that is lying under the water. And you know, the hippopotamus is an animal you hardly see during the day because it's always lying under the water. But you see like the nose or the eyes of the hippopotamus, and you might be tempted to think that that is all that there is to it, but it's one of the most powerful animals on earth. And if it gets out of the water and then you see its mass and the speed at which it moves when it's on the ground, and then you really know that this is really something. And that's really the kind of power that is sitting here, that power that you do not see, but power that is so powerful that can make so much happen. And I'm thinking about my own country, Kenya. In 2008, we had violence, and the violence that we had in 2008 was election violence. And at that time, I was working at the Human Rights Commission, and our office was the only one that was open, one of the very few, if any, that was open. And I would be driving to work and driving past dead bodies and coming back and hoping for the best. And we realized we had to do something about it. We raised a critical mass of people in the country to do something about it. And as Ambassador Swanee said, sometimes it is assumed that you just have to have people sitting around a table like this, one getting the minerals and the other one getting, the resources and all this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, what helped Kenya was that we were able to answer one basic question. And that question, we found it on the ground, speaking to people, and they would tell us, we knew the violence was coming, but we did not know who to tell. So as soon as we started working on connecting those two, we knew the violence is coming and who are we going to tell. Then we developed a very strong system of early warning and a system of early response and getting the two of them to connect. Then we knew then we had it. And we did that through the cell phone. Mainly through the cell phone because we send text messages a lot. In Kenya, we use the phone, we use mobile money as much as use cards here. And we were able to do that through the cell phone, like get people to send free text messages, get women especially, we spoke to women, we said, look out through your window, tell us what you are seeing. Are children going to school? Are the markets closed? Have you been to the hospital? Is there medicine? And then we know that really that there's some situation going on there. So that's the invisibility that I'm talking about. And of course, it's not the only one. There are so many other things that we were able to do. But we are in January. We have an election coming up in August. In 2013, we had another election. And we worked so hard, and we were able to prevent the kind of violence that we had in 2008. So this election that's coming up in August is going to be a game changer. Why? Because if we have violence, it means we'll have undone all the gains. If we do not have violence, we will have a generation that doesn't associate elections with violence. And we want to work towards that. Yeah.
Right, Alice, but explain to me. So you asked women to look out their windows and see, are the children going to school, is the market open, et cetera, and they used their cell phones. But what did they do with their cell phones, and how did that work?
We gave them a number. We advertised it heavily on radio, in newspapers. We sent out through mosques on Friday. They would read it out. Through the churches on Sunday, the priest would read out the number. And we told people, send us a text message and tell us what is going on. But then there was one condition. You had to type the word peace before you send the text message. And we'd worked it out in such a way that if you didn't key in the word peace, your text message wouldn't go through. So the whole idea was, by the time you finish keying in the word peace, if you intended to send a text message and insult whoever is on the other side of the line, then your mind changes. It was psychological. So, but they sent text messages, so many text messages, that actually towards the election, we had our systems collapsed because there were so many text messages coming in and we had to get them up again.
Okay, so when you say so many, like, is that 600? Is it 6,000?
Oh, no, thousands and thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, they kept coming in. And we had servers, we had a partnership of 4 organizations. UNDP and ourselves. I was working at the Cohesion and Integration Commission as a commissioner. And then we had PeaceNet, which is a network of NGOs.
Right, so I'm a mother, I'm looking out, the markets are closed, kids aren't going to school, I think something's wrong.
Yeah.
Something is wrong here. I take my cell phone, I type in peace, which gets me psychologically in a certain place. I put in the number and I say, I'm in the village of Jamba, and kids are not going to school, markets are closed, I'm worried. And then what happens?
The text message gets to a conflict analyst who immediately calls somebody authoritative in that area and asks, is this true? What is going on? And verifies with somebody from civil society, verifies with somebody from government, and then calls that person who sent in the text message and says, we've received your message and we are working on what is going on and thank you very much. So we received some very interesting messages, like from mothers who are telling us, don't tell him that I called in, but my son is on the road, he's blocking the road, and I want him back home, so please don't say that this is me who sent in this message.
And then did someone then send a security person out to that village?
Yes, yes, and then we would, like the conflict analyst would classify, like categorize the message in terms of, is it hate speech, is it in terms of action, the kind of person who would take action. If it needed the security, then we would get the security, and then they would go to the ground. So it was very fast, like we tried to make it as fast as possible. We wanted people to see that they sent a text message and action was taken. And then we would call them, or they would send text messages and say, I now see the police, thank you. Or, you know, that whole connection.
Got it. So police car arrives, or something of the sort, there's a sense of stabilizing, and then you don't have the 1,000 deaths that you had. It's not just that, right? Because people then believe in their government. They believe in the peaceful transfer of power, right? Very, very, very interesting. Thank you. Did you help design that?
Yes, I founded the platform. It's called the Wiano. It's called the Wiano Platform for Peace, and I founded it. It still exists. It's very powerful right now. So once in a while I go in there and just say hello to people, but I have stepped back now. But I founded it, and we brought on board all these other people and from the organizations that I was talking about.
Right.
And now it's a big, big network across Kenya. You ask people about the Wiano Platform for Peace, they will tell you. They'll even tell you the cell phone number to send the message to.
Well, that's fascinating. And I'm sure that even though the details are different, the concepts are different, I'm sure that this relates to others of you up here on the stage.
Well, it relates because we are all the time trying to see how we can manage this alert in our country, for example, and we are always trying to see how we save lives. And I think that is one of the main issues of what we as women do in our different countries. I come from a country that is called Colombia. It's very near USA. And I suppose you all have heard about the Nobel Prize. Now is the news, we are in the news. Our president have gained the Nobel Prize. But very few people know about the stories that are behind that Nobel Prize. There are a lot of stories behind, and I can tell you that this path to peace has been quite difficult, but it has been also for women an achievement that I would like to share, because now we have one of the most gendered agreements in the world. If it's because maybe it's the latest one, but I think we, as women, did an incredible work loving this Havana talks with our ideas, with our papers, with our inputs, to make this gendered focus on gender perspective really be in the agreements. But why was this so important? It was important because we have 8 million of victims in Colombia, that for a population of 47 million of inhabitants is quite a number.
8 million?
8 million.
8 million victims?
Yeah, and that is something that is not, people don't know this.
Sorry, what constitutes a victim?
It constitutes the displaced people. We are one of the great or the biggest displaced people number in the whole world,
Right.
with South Sudan and now with Sudan, with Syria. And we have disappeared people, we have assassinated people, we have all the crimes, sexual violent crimes against women. So these all 8 million victims is a huge number.
Right.
And a huge number of these victims are women. Are women that have been raped, or they are widows, or they are without their children, or they have disappeared. And so women have been working in Colombia for such a long time to have negotiating, political, going out of this conflict, and finally we achieved it. And we were really, really happy when we have the agreement with the FARC. And I don't know if you all know what the FARC means, but it's the Colombian Revolutionary Armed Forces, and in Spanish it's called FARC. And we were very happy, and suddenly something happened, something that we still don't understand, and I suppose we share this feeling with many people here sitting. And we were in the referendum, we were voting for the referendum, and suddenly the referendum went down. And we were astonished. Next day, nobody wanted to go out of bed. We went just to cry and to cry and to cry, because something in our head didn't work. Why are we voting against peace? This is something nobody can understand. So 2 or 3 days after, young people began to motivate everyone and to say, we cannot stay in our beds, we cannot stay in our houses, we cannot stay crying. And then we all together decided to go to the streets. And we did the most incredible march you can't imagine. Every time I talk about this, tears come to my eyes, because it was so powerful. Colombian people are known, as many Latin American people, for dancing and singing and having parties and so on and so on. So I think Colombian people really like to sing and dance. We sing our sorrows, and we sing also when we are happy. But then we have this march that it was incredible. Everyone completely in white. It was like 5:36 in the afternoon when we all gather, and there were people coming from everywhere there in Bogota. And the young people told us, this is going to be in silence. And it's going to be in silence because we are not going to try to offend the ones that voted no. We need everyone to be together for peace. So we were walking in the street. You cannot imagine a Colombian that is silent. That is something incredible. And we were in an incredible silence. You cannot imagine this, everyone in white with a candle in their hands, walking in the street, going to the main Bolivar Plaza, that is a huge, huge plaza in Bogota. And when we finally arrived there was only one song that we can all together, we can sing, and it was the national hymn. And the national hymn is very controversial in Colombia. Many of us don't like it, others like it, whatever. But it was the only song that we all together, the no and the yes people, can sing together. So it was full of people, young adults, and they were singing the national hymn. Anyway, it was an incredible day, an incredible day. And then only one slogan came out of all the mouths of the Colombians that were gathered there. And it was, "We are with the victims. We are with the victims. We are with the victims." Because it was the time of the victim. Because it was the moment that we were trying to achieve, not to have more victims, not to have more death, and not to have this situation for more longer time. But we were defeated. And then everyone began to work. I think my country is so resilient, so incredibly resilient. And women are so incredible workers, because I'm here and I have the fortune to be here, but I talk in behalf of so many incredible women that are in Colombia. Because we are many. It's just because I'm here. But there are many of all kinds of movements: indigenous women, Afro-descendant women, young women, old women, all kinds of women, religious women also. And then we understood that one of the things that they have taken against the agreement was what they call the gender ideology. And that was one of the things they used to say that this agreement was against society, it was against people, because this agreement was going to finish with the families. Everyone is going to be turned to be a lesbian or a gay or whatever. And we couldn't believe this. So we moved forward further, and finally, we have now, 2 days before the president went to receive the Nobel Prize, we had finally the final agreement. And we are very proud of the work we did all together, because now there were 740 something words times that was mentioned the word gender in the agreements. And the No people demanded that gender has to disappear of the agreements. So what everyone managed to do, and the negotiators and everyone, was to explain what gender meant in every word, in every piece of work that they have to do in the agreement. So now we don't have the gender word, only very few, I think 5, but we stand for our rights. And women stood for their rights because it was something that we wanted. But we stand not only for our rights, we stand for everybody's rights, because we are human rights defenders.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
What can I say after this? I would like to share with you a question that I'm often asked in my country, Israel. Why do you women still need an organization like Inclusive Security in Israel? Aren't you satisfied with the achievements that women have in Israel? We have a majority of judges, a majority in our population, a majority of doctors, a majority of, just name it. So why do you still working and trying to change things on the behalf of women? And I must say that Israel now maybe had great achievements regarding the status of women, but the status of women reflects the position and the situation of democratic value everywhere, by the way, and in Israel as well. And I sense that we are facing in the last years challenges, severe challenges to our democratic values because of extremism of all kinds, because of religious extremism, because of national extremism. And this affects very much, not in the first stage, but then it affects the status of women. And I can see every day how achievements that we had achieved in Israel regarding the status of women, we are going back in many, many, many areas. And I must say that still we don't have a fair representation of women in the decision-making forms. I mean cabinet, I mean government, and those are the forms that the real important decisions are taken. And real decision and important decisions are related to wars and related to peace. I think that the fact that we still don't have a fair representation of women in those forms, I know, it's not only that I think, it affects the quality of decisions that are taken. Because we face, unfortunately, still wars in our area, much more wars than any attempts to reach peace. And I must say that the fact that there are few women attending in those forums, I think it has to do with it. We are trying in Israel, the peace movements, to try and to find a common ground with our Palestinian partners, and that's why I'm sorry that Naila is not here. We are trying to find a common ground with regard to finding some kind of a way to break the frozen situation, which is never frozen, by the way, and the status quo, what we call a status quo, is always fake. So everybody is sitting and waiting for the next round. We are trying to prevent this. Men and women of the Israeli peace camp and the Palestinian peace camp, because the situation is not going to stay the way it is. It always will deteriorate. Less democratic values we adopt, less peace movements we have, the situation doesn't look very good. And I don't mean to say that if there will be more women, it necessarily will lead to peace. And we had this agreement before. However, if you don't try, how you will know? So I will highly recommend to try it.
Oh, Syria. Let me give you a picture. April 2011. A body of a 13-year-old child. If it makes you uncomfortable, it makes me very uncomfortable too. We live this in Syria every day. A body of a 13-year-old child was handed back to his family. He was tortured to death in prison. His body was bloated. He had marks of cigarette burns on his body. He's 13. He had torture marks on his body. His name was Hamza al-Khatib. November 2014. There was a woman that was being dragged with hands tied, feet tied, in the desert of Raqqa. As some men are dragging her, she passes by her father. She asks him for forgiveness. He says, "No, I can't." They throw her in a ditch in the ground. And a bunch of men start stoning her. They stone her to death. She committed adultery, they said. The child was killed by the Assad forces, the legitimate representative of the Syrian government until today at the United Nations. The woman was the victim of ISIS. Two evil powers in Syria, two perpetrators of violent crimes, of crimes against humanity. The whole world goes up and roars against ISIS. Coalition of the willing, I don't know, some 35 countries maybe, led by the US, are bombing all of Raqqa where ISIS is. Meanwhile, many countries have stood next to the Assad regime, aiding him through all hardship to stay in power. Russia, Iran, and supposedly a designated terrorist group, Hezbollah. That's the state of Syria. What do Syrians want? I can't go into little stories or simple stories. Maybe I can later on, but I just wanted to give you the feeling that we live as Syrians every day as we're dealing with story after story after story. Just in December, a dear friend of mine, Nabil Sherbaji, also we received his news of death in prison. He was in prison in 2013. He was killed in 2015. Nobody knew of what happened to him until another imprisoned person came out and could bring out the names of the people that they heard say that so-and-so had died last night. Father's name, mother's name. So he comes out and he tells the story. This was past December. We Syrian people want peace. We want a country where these crimes are not going to be repeated. Not just stop them, but they cannot be repeated. This has to stop. We want a country that's democratic, that's pluralistic, that's civic, a government that respects human rights and international law. You sound like a preacher. I know this peace cannot be done unless all Syrians are included in it. And what I mean by that is all ethnicities and all religions. But what I also mean by that, even more importantly, we need to include all of the elderly. We need to include all of the youth. And particularly, we must include in significant numbers fully participating women. Thank you.
I remember when I was writing a book on Bosnia, and it was vignettes, one following another. There were 80 of them. And it was sent out to a reader, and one of the readers came back and said, you know, it's too graphic. I thought, holy Toledo. I mean, you know, I was just barely skimming the surface in this description. I mean, just barely. And he said, it's too graphic? Like, what do you want? Do you want no reality here? And I applaud isn't the right word. I'm awfully grateful that you're willing, because this is hard. It's hard. It's very, very hard. That you're willing to say, hey, you know, we're talking about let's have peace, no more war, no. But this is the reality that you're talking about when we talk about peace and war. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like in Kenya with those 1,000 people killed at the former election. This is what it looks like in Nigeria. This is what it looks like with the Intifada. And this is, you know, thank you, because you make it real for us.
Violence begets violence. And that's what's happening in Syria.
So here, as I said, you have up here the women, and in the audience here, the women, as they talk about women in their conflict areas. This is a time now for you all in the audience to come to us with what's on your mind in the form of a question. And as you know, a question ends with a question mark. Palwasha, I'm glad you're going to join us. And there are 4 microphones. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, you have a microphone right over there.
Hello. I do know a couple of the women who are there on the panel.
And please.
I'm Lori Sokol. I'm Executive Director of Women's E-News. And as I'm listening to these stories and some of these very horrible stories of misogyny and gender violence and other kind of racism and bigotry in your countries, I'm sure you've been following what's been happening in our country since the election in early November, where we're beginning to experience for the first time levels of misogyny and bigotry and discrimination based on gender, race, ethnicity, sexual preference, LGBTQ. Do you are you frightened for us, is my question. Do you see the possibility of our country, from your view, being as significantly or nearly affected because of the new administration that's going to be taking over in 10 days, that there's possibility for this level of violence that your countries have been experiencing?
I'm glad you asked. It's Lori, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very glad you asked that because these leaders have asked me if we could have a session, we're going to do it tomorrow, to talk about the change in administrations and what that means for our country, but also what it means for yours. That's me tap dancing to give them some time to think about what they want to say about this.
I'm going to sit down so I can type on my computer.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. We can find you. You're on the front row. It's nice to meet you, by the way. Thank you. Yes, please, Rosa Emilia.
Yes, I think when we realize that one of the issues that have been used for doing campaigns against our agreements was this gender issue, as I said before, we were astonished and we were saying, what? But then we understood something that we haven't understood before. And it was, there is an incredible fundamentalism that is rising everywhere, about these gender issues. And when societies try, I don't know, feel in danger of change, and I can say that my country is something, we are in a moment that is quite complicated because we are trying, there is a country that is trying to die, and there is a country that is trying to rise. And in this, all the ashes of this old country are stopping the growing of these seeds of the new country. And in that stopping, they are using this gender issue to say that these gender things, in a very conservative way, are ending with values and are ending with families, are ending with ethics, are ending with everything. So that is not a problem for only my country. It was a problem because we were in a peace agreement and it was a huge problem. But it's a problem that is all over the world. When a woman in Syria is punished and killed in the way that Mariam has described, is almost a version of having censored or not permitting rights of women all over the world. So we think that conservative societies and all this incredible non-knowing what women meant and for society is all over the world. It's something that is going to happen here and it's going to happen everywhere. So that's why we think women and people have to be so aware about this. This can happen anywhere.
Thank you.
I fully agree, of course, but we agree almost on everything. Except the issue, the wrong women is a wrong, to put not the right woman in a position is better than not having a woman at all, but this will continue to argue later. I would like to say something. I think the danger in this kind of situation, which we face in my country, is that at first there are only very small signs of it. And one tends to ignore them. Okay, let's not make a big fuss of it. It happens, you know. Okay, so they don't invite women to this conference. Never mind. It's not as if women are never invited to conferences. You can ignore it. But this is the real danger, because every sign of discrimination against women, and not only against women, is a red flag to the values of democracy. Yeah. And we need the media to be on our side here. Not to say, okay, why do you think I should put it in the front page? Is it so important? We have other important issues to discuss. Yes, it is, because this is a very slippery way down, and we need to be very careful. I'm saying it because in Israel, unfortunately, we have reached a very dangerous stage, and we need to be aware of it and not to let it happen with all the means that we have.
Katie, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, and thank you for being here. My name is Katie Hill. I'm a career military officer and a national security fellow here at the Kennedy School. I would like to know what, in your opinion, is the thing that military officers most misunderstand about conflict resolution?
Wow.
How long do you have?
You can start. You were yesterday.
Okay, the question was, what is a military officer supposed to?
What does a military officer misunderstand about conflict resolution?
You know, for a long time, I trained military officers in Kenya, and one general told me that the difference between my thinking and his thinking was that if he is given a task and told, take that bridge, he will assign all his energies to taking that bridge. And if I'm given the same task, given my role as a peace builder and a human rights activist, I will concentrate more on what happens between here and the bridge. So really, what military officers need to understand is what happens between here and the bridge, that is so important to everyone else, and that that objective of taking the bridge, that there are so many factors that come into place before you get that bridge. So we had a very long conversation with him. It was in within the basis we were discussing about integrated peacekeeping, where you go for peacekeeping and all of you get in at the same time, because usually the military wants to get in fast and take their bridges. They don't want to get in with everyone else. Everyone else slows them down. And I think what I should say to any military officer is allow us to slow you down. Thank you.
Katie, I'd like to thank you to get in there with you, Alice. Right after shock and awe, I went to the Pentagon. I met with a general who was overseeing the operation. I said, look, this is the moment. This is the moment. You've got to go into Iraq with the women right now. It's the women who know which disaffected 17-year-olds have guns under their mattresses. They know that about their sons and their neighbors' sons, etc. These women are so invested in the security. This is the moment. These women, they can go places because they're second-class citizens. They can get into all kinds of places. You've got to have them on your side, on our side, if you're going to stabilize now and prevent more bloodshed. He listened to me for an entire hour. He was so respectful. He gave me 3 cups of coffee. He couldn't have been nicer. And at the end, he said, Madam Ambassador, I want to tell you how much I appreciate your coming and spending the time with me, and I am taking it very much to heart, and when we get the place secure, we'll be able to tend to women's issues. And I thought, I don't know how I could have been clearer. I wasn't talking about cervical cancer. You know, I was talking, obviously, about security. Yeah, please.
Actually, something Israela said was last night when we were talking to military fellows, she was like, I understood the jargon. And it seems like they have a specific jargon, a way of talking about things. It's the same with the religious community. Religious leaders tend to have a jargon. And I think women leaders also have a jargon. And sometimes we're talking about the same things, but we're talking past each other. We don't quite understand each other. It's like we're almost using a different language. And I think the one thing we really need to help communicate is understanding that language and that jargon and how to translate that language and that jargon across to the military and then other divides, whether it's women's organizations.
Yeah,
or
you're
religious.
exactly right. I should have gone in, and this is what I failed to do. I should have gone in and said, I have an idea about how you could reach your military objective.
Your
Right?
strategic military objective. Or maybe Israela can help us with some of the jargon since she was
I should have called Israela first, clearly.
Yesterday was really great, but it's not only the jargon and the language, it's the state of mind, because being a former military, I can tell you that I was, and I'm still, in some cases, interested in the result and getting the result as fast as I can. Time is very time sensitive, and I want to do it in a simple way. And I really would like to avoid, as a general military, I would like to avoid complicated situation when there are many stakeholders and many civilians involved, and I cannot figure out because I was not taught this way in my military school. So it's not only about the language. The language is an expression of the state of mind. But I would like to remind you, Swanee, that we were in this conference in Washington, D.C., where a very distinguished general, I don't know if it is the same general, but he was really impressive.
It was different.
A different general. He came on stage and he said out loud, he was the military commander of the US forces in at least 2 countries in the Middle East, and that's it. And he said that it took him like 1 year to realize that it is not all about military tactics and strategies. He has to take into consideration, of course, other factors.
Can I add just a little bit of a theoretical maybe element to this? You're talking military, but I think there's also a patriarchal foundation to all of this. And I think the military is a tool for patriarchy. So the way it works, it doesn't have to be even a military. I don't talk to military people when I'm talking to regular, your average citizen, like man, civilian in Syria, and we're talking about the need for including women in all of the peace processes, which they have done actually a great job at in Syria, and having them sitting at all of the tables. And the response we always get is that, oh yes, exactly the same thing. Oh, the blood is running, and like people are getting killed. There's so many situations we need to deal with now. Women issues, like we can deal with that later, without realizing that this is part and integral, I think, to the. I mean, I believe with the whole situation in any conflict, conflict or non-conflict, I think it's the way of thinking, like you said, it's the state of mind, the patriarchal state of mind that we live in, and how power and violence and having weapons and having a more powerful military is what makes you stand and gives you more power to control others and to do whatever you would like to do. And there, it's very, very difficult to give that up.
Yes.
Hello, I'm Renata. I'm from Brazil.
Can you tilt the microphone?
Oh, is it better now?
Much better.
I'm from Brazil. I just moved here, and I've been involved in some political activism in Brazil as well. I was wondering what it would be great to hear from all of you, because we're all from different cultures, including the US. What can we women do to become more and more part of these major places where they're taking the decisions for peace in the world?
You want to start? No, I was about to say, I now work in Nigeria. I mediate armed conflict in Nigeria. And I recently brought together 56 ethnic communities. They put together a peace agreement. It took a long time. And when you ask what you can do as a woman, I'm looking at this institution where we are sitting today, the Center of Knowledge, that so much we would benefit so much from people coming in, even as researchers, even as people who can come in and give us different perspectives of other things, people who can come and look at the conflict from an anthropological perspective, a geographical perspective, an engineering perspective. So many perspectives are needed. And more than that, to ensure that, we keep talking about women's inclusion, and we talk about it like something up there, and yet it means so much if you are sitting at a table and you are sitting with women and men and youth, people who are all able to contribute, so that then you're able to begin taking it for granted that women can sit at the table, because we are still at a point in time where we cannot take that for granted, that women cannot discuss their own peace that we still struggle. So we need your voices as an institution. We need your voices in everything that you're doing to help us in terms of what we are doing. And you're most welcome. You're most welcome to the places that we work. We will definitely find ways to work with you.
Yes, and I would like to compliment that, because I think a woman anywhere, anytime, can stand for rights. It's not only being in a special place, it's being everywhere. It's being at home, fighting for the rights of us or our children at home, but it also is when you are not part of the government, being part of movements or being part of citizenship that will stand for human rights and women's rights and others' rights. I mean, it's something that you have to have clear. It's something about your citizenship. You and anybody or everybody can be someone that in democracy will really stand for rights. So you are, or you can be anywhere and everywhere at the same time fighting for rights. So how to get to these power places that we call to make the difference. In the case of Colombia, the women's movement is, as you know, in Latin America, women's movement is quite strong. It's all kinds of movements. There are people that are best, people that are not as good, but the Colombian women's movement for peace advocacy is very strong. And we were not being called to be part of the agreements. But then we had a slogan, and we use it very much. It is, we want to be part of the agreement. We don't want to be the ones that are going to be given the agreement to. So we decided to go for it. So we organized ourselves in despite of all our differences, and we were there all the time, all the time. If they don't want to hear us, they have to hear us. If they don't want a document, we have a document. If we send something like 18 or 19 documents for each one of the points. So now we are recognized. So now for the implementation of the agreement, they have to take into account women. Because we are in the localities and everywhere, women are essential because all of what they have said. Without women in the local areas, peace is almost impossible because we know the daily life. So political participation, land reform, drugs issue, we have to learn about everything, but we are involved in everything. But it's like, it's our own freedom. We have to go for our rights.
Yeah, you know, it reminds me of in Liberia, one of the women who was very involved in stopping the war, she said, we knew the price of a bag of rice. And I didn't understand the significance until later I discovered they were called the rice wars, right? And that's about women's experience, life experience. That doesn't get into biology, right? And in Darfur, the story about how women were finally brought into the 6th round or the 9th round of the negotiations. They walk in and the men are arguing and arguing and arguing about who gets the river. And so they can't come into an agreement because they can't decide who gets the river. And a woman says, you know that river dried up several years ago. And the reason she knew is because the women fetch the water.
Yeah.
Right? It's not because she's smarter. It's not because she's born more peace-loving, both of which may be true, okay? But she also knew where the water was. Yes, sir.
Thanks. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for all the work that you do and also for sharing lessons learned with all of us. It's certainly good to have a multiplier effect, and it's deeply appreciated. My question is, could
you identify yourself first?
Sure. My name is Steve Kribner. and I've been working in conflict resolution for the last 15 years. And I've worked with some of you, and it's good to see you. My question is, what have been the most effective tactics that male allies have had, colleagues have had, that have worked with you to make sure that women's voices are brought into the processes in the few occasions when they are and should be? And what can be learned from that, and what would you like to see replicated?
You have to follow. No, they're all looking at me because I'm always saying that that I'm the product of male allies. I was made by male allies, and it happened by coincidence because we were going, at that time I was working at the Cohesion and Integration Commission, and 3 of us, commissioners, 2 men and myself, were going to mediate on the Somali-Kenya border between ethnic communities there.
You were going to mediate?
Yes, between two Somali clans. And when we were going there, and I was dressed appropriately, totally covered up and everything, but we were still debating. One of the commissioners came from the area, and we had a problem. We were thinking to ourselves, will they accept a woman in the room? And then the 2 of them told me, okay, now this is the plan. And one of them was the chair of the commission. He said, this is the plan. We will walk in, and then as the chair of the commission, I'll introduce us, and then I will say, you are the chair of the session. So it's highly unlikely that anyone will raise their hands and say, can that woman leave? Because you will be chairing the session. And then they gave me a crash course. They told me, you must understand that when you're in that position, you're speaking to men. Men respect authority. Men expect you to look them in the eye. Men expect you to sit up straight. Men expect you to make decisions. Men expect you to stand up and conclude what somebody is saying if they're being too long-winded. So really, totally take charge. So when we got in there, we continued taking charge, and I took charge, and it began happening more and more often, to the extent that in one of the sessions, like months later, not in the beginning, one of the sessions, one man stood up and said, and I was chairing the session, and he said, wars would end if women were not so stupid. Wow. And I looked at him, and I wanted to react, but then something told me not to, but I was so bitter, I couldn't believe it that he said it to me. So, but when we broke for lunch, my colleagues told me, what are you being bitter about? You've been accepted into the men's club. That's how we talk about you in your absence, Like, what's your problem?
Wow, that's so interesting.
But I spoke to the man, the one who said that, and I asked him, why did you say that? And then he told me, because women have refused to accept the power they have over us. If they are the ones telling us that, oh, you went out on this raid, everybody went out on this raid, and when they came back, we were all singing for the hero. You've never done anything. You've never even brought home a cow. What's your problem? Like the women are inciting us. So he said, go tell the women to stop inciting us, and that is how the war will end. And then it began a whole conversation with the women. But essentially, what he was communicating was, he was saying women are stupid, and everybody got it except me, in the sense that they do not know the power they have to support.
Can I continue in that story and tell
Please.
you another little story? With respect to men working with women. In June 2011, right when the Syrian revolution had started and it has not been militarized yet, there was this big conference that took place in Turkey, in Antalya, and there were a lot of men. There were about maybe 200, 250 men. I don't even remember the numbers, but in comparison, there were a lot less women, maybe 50 women. I don't have exact, but it just seemed they were overwhelming majority, and we were the minority. So when there's this big auditorium, we're all sitting in it, and then we notice the women sitting in the auditorium, we're all sitting in the back. And all of the men are sitting at the front, and the way it's actually divided up, the older the man, the grayer the hair, the further up they were. So in the intermission, we're sitting in the back there, and with my friend Mahja Qaf, we're looking at each other like, why are all the women sitting in the back? Why did we end up here? So we realized it was our own doing. Nobody had assigned any seats. So it was us getting up and deciding during intermission that we actually needed to go actively sit at the front so that we take seats at the front. However, because we were a lot less than the men, we did need to actually talk to some of the men that were there also, mostly younger men. Anyways, we took seats at the front and we sat in the front, and I took one of the seats, and then this man whom I really, really respect comes at the front of me and he tells me, "Mariam, you're sitting in my seat." And I look at him like this. I do want to get up because I do want to give him his seat back, but I do hold my ground and I tell him, but it doesn't have your name on it. So, and then it created problems. I mean, the process is not easy. And this is something why I'm mentioning this story is that it's a process that needs to be done with the initiative of women. Women need to do it themselves. They need to go physically to the front, mentally, intellectually, emotionally. We have to be at the front, and I love the song that that Precious has. Maybe we could.
No, we're going to end. We have to end with that.
Yeah,
right?
we have to
that
end with
women,
that song.
Women needs to be at the front. Women need to go to the front, but to have the support. I think it's a great lesson to be learned that we needed to have also the support of the men that were there, and that's how we were able to keep some of the seats.
I have a story along that line as well. When I went to manage a program on women's rights within Islam, I had to manage all men, and they were all religious leaders in their own right. We were working to engage with men on women's rights. These men were, in their communities, were the gatekeepers, so we were working with religious leaders to talk to men, to talk about women's rights and open doors for women's rights in their communities. And here I was, an Afghan American, some people might call me a Halfgan, and I was going into this situation not knowing the people that I was talking to. And my colleagues, one of them was this very tall, big, bearded man who wears a turban and a chappan, very traditional. And he goes in and he introduces me, and he says, "You know what? Palwasha has a master's in religion. So she knows her stuff. She comes from a family of mujahideen who fought against the Soviets." And just that simple introduction gave me the authority in the room. Everybody respected me. And I was able to, I had a lot of respect. They looked up to me, and I was able to manage the program and manage all of these male staff on a program that was about religion and women's rights.
And thank you. Thank you. You know what? My background is also theology, so it means a lot to me, especially since back in 1990 wrote a piece on the motherhood of God, which I'll send to you at some point.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
She's smiling down on us right now, and I'm not going to say anything more like that. But Israela, I bet you, I mean, I can't remember if we've talked about it, but there have to be examples from your life about male allies.
Since I spent most of my life in the military.
In the what?
In the military. And I did at least, I was promoted at least 6 or 7 times to positions that were never held by women. You can assume that I was promoted by men. And I was thinking, after Steve had asked his question, what do they have in common, those men? And I'm not sure, but I think most of them, some of them promoted me because they didn't have any other good alternative, I must admit. However, some of them did it because they were men that were not frightened of criticism. They were self-confident. They were brave not only in the sense of having courage in the battlefield, they were brave in a larger sense. They were human beings that were not afraid of this criticism, and they were willing to go after their values. And this is something that I owe them. And there are some military men around. They absolutely do it. Otherwise, will not have Katie here and other wonderful women in the military.
Yeah. And I think it's basically time. Oh my, hi. I apologize for oh dear. Forget what I was going to do. Please, can you, how do I choose? Okay, bingo. Yes, identify yourself.
Sure. I'm Judith Olson, and I'm the co-director of the Program on Religion and Conflict Transformation, BU School of Theology, KSG graduate, and a graduate of your course, Dr. Hunt here in Peacemaking, Women in Peacemaking. I thank all of you for your incredible heartfelt leadership, and I'm particularly taken with this phenomena you described that's happening around the world, where there's such pushback to feminism, to women in peacemaking, to liberal ideology, and I'm curious about strategies that you're trying to use in your countries that would help us understand and work with the level of fear that is happening out there. And if you've had any success in engaging some of your non-fundamental religious leaders to help with this.
And we'll have to have only one of you answer because we are out of time. Grab it.
Everybody's looking at me. If you could just rephrase the question or repeat the question so that I get a better sense of what exactly you're...
Sure.
Yeah.
With the level of fear out there and the backlash, how is it that perhaps we can, it's not always about fundamentalist religion, it can be ideology too, but what strategies can we initiate to try and address and work with some of these fears and start speaking some of the same language? You talked about speaking across our jargon, so that the folks that are initiating the most resistance, that we can find some common ground with.
Right, and I know each one of you has examples, so.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at my friend Alice because I know she has a lot of examples in this area. I will just be very, very short to say that it's not an easy task and it doesn't happen quickly. The work that I do is really mapping to understand who are the different actors in different areas and where are the ones that are closest to a project we may be working on related to building resources of peace building and women's rights, and then working with those that are closest to the objectives within their own networks. But it's like, working with very small increments of people who are closer and trying to find ways to talk across those lines. But can I hand it over to Alice because I know she has great examples in this.
In just one paragraph.
Yeah,
a reasonable paragraph, Alice. Right.
No, but very quickly, so much of what we are doing right now is working with women who are traditionally not working on peace building, people with authority in their communities, the nurses, the teachers, people who communities are used to receiving instructions from. When the nurse tells you take your pills 3 times a day, you will take them 3 times a day. So in addition to that, if she tells you that this and this needs to happen, then you get that information on board. But of course, in places where there are already peace processes, ensuring that we get women in at many levels as possible, at the negotiation level, at the mediation level, at the implementation level, at every possible level that you can think of. It's so much about not letting, safeguarding the gains that we already have, but working even more harder as we keep seeing that the indicators, like if you look at the US election, for example, and elections like in other parts of the world, like even in my own country, Kenya, then you begin to see similarities of the indicators, and then working to get as many people as possible to understand that these are indicators towards violence and what to do to make sure that it doesn't happen. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
One sentence.
We have to gather together also in different levels. We need the international community, we need the national gathering together, and we need to have alliances everywhere.
One sentence, Israela.
We need really to look at the sentence that the wife of the president, Michelle Obama, said during the elections. They go low, we go high. We need to think about it, because this is a different era now, post-truth. Our opponents are using a lot of new weapons, some of them considered in the far past, like a year ago, not legitimate. So we need to sit and to reassess what we are going to do about it.
Mariam?
To me, fundamentalism or extremism is not just exactly just religions. It's a fundamentalist and extremist idea of any form of shape or format. I think, to me, a fundamentalist is when you believe that violence, that military is the solution. That's one of the worst fundamentalists, I think, in the world.
And somehow making those bridges between the people who are so different from you, except for in one place, except for in one way, and connecting at that one way. I come from a fundamentalist family in Texas, right? And finding that one bit of commonality, you know, with my family members saying, hey, I know that we share the value of respect for African Americans. I know we don't share that in terms of lesbian, gay. I get that, but we do for African Americans, and we are together on that. And when she says I had to hold my nose and vote, cancel my vote, and because of the Supreme Court, I have to say, you know what? Let's not even talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the values that we share for African Americans, and just focusing on that little bit. I mean, what are our choices, right? What are the choices? You know what? We're going to end this with you. What? Yes, we've got to have you up here. We have to have you, my friend Precious from Liberia. We met in Monrovia. And so you have to picture, we should all stand up. You have to picture this. So this song, I hear it in Monrovia, and then I get in a helicopter, and the helicopter drops us down, well, actually lands, and then in some village, and there are no roads. The roads are all destroyed, and it's just, you know, the roads are destroyed. You can't get there, and people are singing the same song. You have to move this. People are singing the same song in this village as they were singing in Monrovia, and you're gonna learn it from Precious Dennis.
Thank you. The song is short, it's simple, it's easy. We in Liberia would do it.
Speak, you have to shout.
In Liberia, the Liberian women have been inspired since the ascendancy of President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf as president. I was so proud when I saw her picture in the library today. I couldn't wait. I just had to express this. So we're so encouraged, and we now believe that no longer men in front and the women at the back. Together we will walk side by side, side by side. I think everyone else here know the song. Please join in, and we're going to sing it 2 times.
And if not, you can clap.
You can stand up, you can go along with us.
Stand up.
Okay. No longer men in front and the women in the back. Together we will walk side by side, 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 side by side. No longer men in front and the women at the back. Together we will walk side by side, 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 side by side. No longer men in front and the women at the back. Together we will walk side by side, side by side. Thank you. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you. Thank you. And I know that that is the usual way that forums end at the Kennedy School of Government. So welcome to the first forum of the year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, was that good?
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much.
How nice.